Black boy denied first-class seat, unaware his father owns the airline. Jaden clenched his boarding pass in his hand, uncertain why the woman at the gate kept frowning. He tried to stand up tall, ignoring the sweat that trickled down his back. He had never flown alone before. His mother's instructions had been simple. Get to his seat, fasten his seatbelt, and behave. Nothing unusual about that. Yet something about the stern expression the gate agent wore told him this would be far from a normal flight. He approached the jet bridge hesitantly. He could hear muffled announcements, a steady roar of engines outside, and the dull, constant shuffle of passengers in a hurry to reach their seats. He paused when he noticed a group of people being ushered down the corridor into first class without question. A man in a crisp business suit offered him a small smile, then vanished beyond the wide door leading to the plane's interior. Jaden glanced down at the slip of paper that declared his seat assignment in first class, thanks to a surprising gesture from his mother. She had insisted that he fly in comfort for once, especially with such a long flight ahead. That seat assignment felt like a precious ticket to a better life, if only for a few hours. A new wave of passengers advanced, their carry-ons bumping into each other, some looking impatient, others exhausted. Jaden stepped forward with a cautious sense of purpose. The gate agent, a woman with short brown hair, glared as if she wanted to question his every motive. She eyed his boarding pass skeptically, then looked him over. He could feel her judgment. Her voice dropped to a near whisper as she asked him to confirm that he was meant to fly first class. Jaden nodded, startled at how harsh her tone sounded. She pressed her lips together before waving him along. Once he took a few steps onto the aircraft, he found himself face to face with a flight attendant wearing an artificial smile. He offered a polite greeting, but the attendant only blinked, scanning him from head to toe. Jaden thought he might be imagining the tension, so he tried to dismiss the strange vibe in the pit of his stomach. The flight attendant barely glanced at his boarding pass and motioned for him to keep walking. He took his place in the first row of first class, settling into the plush seat. He noticed how few kids ever ended up in this section. He wondered if the other passengers would think he was somebody special. A middle-aged man 2 seats away offered a curt nod. Jaden tried to smile back, but all he received was a dismissive glance. He stowed his bag under the seat and tried to relax. A pang of guilt rolled through him because he had never sat in such an expensive seat before. Memories of his mother telling him not to get used to these luxuries nudged at him. It made him wonder if this was a one-time treat or something else entirely. He looked around. 2 flight attendants were passing out pre-flight drinks to the other first-class passengers. They seemed to skip over him. He waited, eventually clearing his throat to get their attention, but neither turned to acknowledge him. He felt invisible. Determined not to make a scene, he tried to stay calm. As the last passengers settled in, the plane door closed, and the flight attendant went through the usual safety instructions. Jaden couldn't help but let his mind wander. He thought about how his mother had insisted that he make this trip alone for once, explaining it was time he learned independence. She had said his father would finally meet him on the other side. The father he knew only through a few postcards and fleeting phone calls was supposed to be waiting. Jaden swallowed as he recalled the swirl of questions. Why was his father suddenly appearing in his life? Why now? Why this urgency? There was an unnerving sense that the ground might shift under him if he let himself hope too much. The plane lifted off, and Jaden felt the familiar pressure in his ears. An hour passed with little event, though the flight attendants served lunch to everyone else in first class and seemed to ignore Jaden's presence. He tried not to stare too obviously at the plates of well-prepared meals, but he felt the embarrassment swelling in his chest. He cleared his throat again, hoping at least one flight attendant would remember he existed. When that didn't work, he decided to speak up. He pressed the call button. A flight attendant approached, hands folded in front of her. She leaned in slightly, her gaze flicking over him with disapproval. He explained politely that he hadn't received a meal, that he was supposed to be in first class, and that he could provide his boarding pass. The flight attendant's eyes narrowed. She hesitated, as though uncertain if she believed him. Then she huffed and glanced at his pass. After a prolonged moment, she mumbled an apology that sounded forced, then walked away. A few moments later, she brought him a tray that looked smaller and less appetizing than the others he had observed. He tried to hide his disappointment and pushed through, telling himself it was no big deal. He forced the meal down, noticing how the other passengers in first class exchanged glances now and again. He wondered if they were curious about why he was there, or if he was just imagining the tension. A few whispered conversations seemed to end abruptly whenever his eyes flicked in their direction. He tried to focus on reading a graphic novel he had tucked into his backpack, but the environment felt stifling. After a couple of hours, Jayden started drifting to sleep when a nudge on his shoulder jolted him upright. A different flight attendant stood there, a polite but cold look on her face. She informed him that she needed to verify his seat assignment again. He frowned. Why did they keep harassing him? Still, he complied and showed his boarding pass. She studied it for a long time, then sighed, explaining that there must have been a mix-up because some other passenger had apparently been assigned this seat. Jayden's heart pounded. He had done nothing wrong. He wanted to protest, but all that came out was a timid explanation that his mother had purchased the ticket. The attendant raised an eyebrow at that notion. A middle-aged woman with glossy pearls overheard the conversation and quietly murmured her disbelief that a kid like Jayden could be in first class. Jayden's face burned with shame. The flight attendant suggested moving him to economy while they sorted out the problem. He tried to protest, but his voice faltered when the attendant insisted it would only be for a short while. He muttered an agreement and gathered his backpack. As he walked down the aisle, he felt the stares from every row. Passengers in the economy section offered blank looks or mild sympathy, but Jayden avoided eye contact. He found a vacant seat near the back and settled in, feeling a humiliation that stung more than he cared to admit. He kept telling himself it would just be temporary. Time dragged on. No one returned to tell him he could go back to first class. He felt a burning sense of injustice. He also wondered if his mother would ever hear about this ordeal. She had paid for that seat, and he was certain she wouldn't be happy to learn how her son had been treated. Yet there was nothing he could do except wait. He ended up next to a teenager named Andre, who wore headphones and occasionally glanced at Jayden curiously. After a while, Andre pulled off his headphones and asked Jayden why he had a first-class boarding pass stuck in his backpack pocket. Jayden explained the situation, trying to keep his voice steady. He didn't want to sound whiny. Andre nodded with sympathetic understanding, mentioning that he had once tried to upgrade his seat using miles and had been given a hard time because of some glitch in the system. Jayden wished it were just a glitch, but he suspected something else was going on, something more hurtful. They spent part of the flight chatting about music, sports, and the kind of games they liked. Jayden felt slightly more at ease talking to Andre, but the sting of what had happened in first class continued to weigh on him. He thought about his father, the mysterious man he was about to meet. Maybe if his father had been there, he could have helped prevent the ordeal, or maybe that was wishful thinking. Jayden shifted in his seat, rummaging for a phone charger that he realized he had left at his original seat in first class. He doubted he'd have the courage to retrieve it. Halfway through the flight, the seatbelt sign came on, and turbulence rattled the plane. The captain's voice came over the intercom with instructions. Jayden glanced around, noticing the worried expressions on some passengers' faces. He took a deep breath, deciding it was just standard procedure. He closed his eyes, wishing he could sleep, but his thoughts whirled. Eventually the turbulence eased, but no flight attendant returned to update Jayden's seat situation. Deflated, he accepted that he was stuck in economy for the remainder of the flight. He tried to prepare himself mentally for the next step, landing in a new city, meeting the father he barely knew. As the plane touched down with a jolt, Jayden grabbed his backpack and made his way off, pressing into the bustling crowd of travelers. He tried to push the memory of first class from his mind. It would be easier to move on if he just forgot it. He headed toward baggage claim, scanning the crowd for any familiar face, uncertain what his father even looked like in person. All he had were a few photos from years ago. Suddenly, a man in an impeccably tailored suit made eye contact with him and waved. Jaden's breath caught. Something about the man's posture and expression was warm yet authoritative. Jaden hesitated, half expecting the man to walk right by him. Instead, the man stepped forward, a bittersweet smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Jaden recognized him. It was the face from those photos, older now, with faint lines around his eyes. His father. "Son," the man said softly. "Welcome." He opened his arms. Jaden felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Anger, curiosity, relief. He let himself be pulled into a hug. They stood there awkwardly for a moment before his father patted his back gently. On the ride from the airport, Jaden stared out the window while his father navigated the traffic. Questions buzzed in Jaden's mind. He found the courage to speak up. "Why did Mom send me to see you now?" His father paused, eyes on the road. He sighed. "I've been working for a long time, building something. It kept me away, and I'm sorry for that. I'd like to explain when the time is right. And I really wanted to see you." His voice quivered slightly at the end. Jaden studied him, unsure if this was genuine or just another empty promise. All he could do was nod. His father pulled into a reserved parking space outside a tall building. He guided Jaden through the lobby, exchanging polite nods with people who seemed to know him well. Jaden looked around in awe. The place dripped with affluence, but he couldn't grasp exactly what kind of business his father ran. His father pressed the elevator button, and they ascended swiftly. Jaden felt the air pressure change in his ears. He followed his father down a hallway into a spacious office with large windows. His father invited him to sit, and then took the seat behind a massive desk. "I run an airline," his father said, exhaling in relief, as if he had waited a long time to utter those words directly to Jaden. "I founded it years ago. It's been my life's work. The last few years have been complicated, but I've always wanted you to be a part of it." Jaden sat there in disbelief. "You own an airline?" The memories of the humiliating flight rushed into his mind. Could it really be true that he'd just been mistreated on a flight run by his own father's company? He gripped the chair, feeling like he had stepped into an alternate reality. His father nodded. "I know it's a shock. I wanted to see you sooner, but things got complicated with me and your mother. I had to make sure everything was in order before bringing you into my world." He frowned thoughtfully. "How was your flight? Did you get here okay?" Jaden's heart pounded. He opened his mouth, hesitant, then blurted out what had happened. He explained every detail. The gate agent's coldness, the flight attendant's dismissal, the humiliating relocation from first class to economy. He didn't spare a single moment. By the time he finished, his father's expression had darkened with anger. "They kicked you out of first class?" his father asked, voice trembling with suppressed rage. Jaden nodded, tears threatening to betray him. His father's hand clenched into a fist on the desk. "I'm so sorry you went through that," he whispered. "That's unacceptable." A knock on the door interrupted them. A woman in a neat skirt and blouse stepped in, looking surprised to see Jaden. She addressed his father with formal respect, then handed him a file containing paperwork. Jaden's father thanked her and dismissed her. As soon as she left, he leaned forward with determination in his eyes. "I'm going to make this right," he said, voice low and steady. "I can't let anyone treat my son like that." Jaden felt a surge of conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was relieved that his father was furious on his behalf. On the other hand, he was overwhelmed by the guilt of complaining to a man he didn't even know well. He swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. His father stood and gestured for Jaden to follow him. They left the office and descended to another floor. People in corridors parted to let his father pass, greeting him with either admiration or fear. Jaden realized that his father was powerful here, and the weight of that power was overwhelming. They entered a sleek conference room. A few employees wearing name badges were called in. Jaden's father explained the situation. The employees listened wide-eyed as he demanded an immediate investigation. He wanted the names of the crew, the logs, and any possible explanation for why his son had been treated so poorly. The employees scrambled into action, leaving in a hurry to gather the necessary information. Jaden hovered near the door, feeling vulnerable. He had never been the center of so much adult attention. His father approached, placing a hand on Jaden's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong," he said, sensing Jaden's anxiety. "We have rules here to prevent discrimination. Anyone violating those rules has to answer for it." Jaden nodded silently. The swirl of sudden authority disoriented him. He still hadn't processed that his father was actually the owner of an airline. More than that, he found himself unsettled by how swiftly his father took charge. There was a fierce protective energy in the man, something Jaden had never quite felt from any adult in his life. Part of him wanted to trust it, to let himself feel safe, but trust came hard for him. After a tense hour, a couple of executives returned with reports. They looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot, as they disclosed that the gate agent and flight attendants involved in Jaden's flight had been identified. They had discovered that there was indeed an available seat in first class for Jaden the entire time, and that the airline's internal system showed no record of a double booking. The shift supervisor admitted that the reasons cited for removing Jaden from first class were inconsistent with standard procedure. Jaden's father's jaw tightened, and he glanced at his son with sorrow. The unspoken truth was clear. Jaden had faced blatant racial bias. Jaden stared at the polished floor. He felt a lump in his throat. This ugly reality was a reminder of things he had encountered before, though never so publicly or cruelly. His father took a measured breath, telling the executives that he expected swift disciplinary measures. He also demanded that every flight crew member undergo new training. He made it plain that his son was not to be singled out, but that no other passenger of color should be either. When the meeting ended, Jaden trailed his father out into the hallway. Rage simmered inside him, accompanied by a grim satisfaction that these people would face consequences. But it didn't erase the humiliation he felt on that plane. It also didn't erase the years of absence from his father's life. They rode the elevator down in silence. Jaden recalled the tense conversations he had overheard between his mother and father on the phone, the accusations, the tears his mother had shed behind closed doors. Now he was witnessing another side to the man, powerful, commanding, and quick to defend him. They stepped out into the lobby. His father told him they would grab dinner and talk more. Jaden nodded absently, still processing. Outside, the sun had begun to set, painting the streets in a wash of orange. His father guided him into a sleek car, and they pulled away from the building. Jaden asked, voice uncertain, "When did you start your airline?" His father drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, recounting how he had once been a pilot for a smaller regional airline. Tired of seeing inequality and lack of opportunity, he had dreamt of building something that would offer better wages and more diverse hiring practices. Along the way, he partnered with business investors who believed in his vision. It all sounded like a grand triumph, but Jaden could sense there was more to the story. He wondered if that ambition had cost his father personal relationships, maybe even the one with Jaden's mother. They reached an upscale restaurant. Jaden stumbled out of the car, feeling underdressed in his simple t-shirt and jeans. His father placed a hand on his back, ushering him inside with confidence. The hostess greeted his father warmly, obviously accustomed to seeing him. They were shown to a discreet booth toward the rear, where the lighting was subdued. They studied the menus. Jaden noticed the prices and swallowed nervously, never having seen such numbers for basic dishes. He thought of how hard his mother had worked to provide for him. Even though she never let him see the exact bills, he sensed the burden on her. Now, in this cushy booth, it felt like a different planet. His father seemed to read his mind. He leaned forward, his tone gentle. "I know it's a lot, but tonight is about you and me. Order what you like." Jaden nodded, deciding on a burger because everything else sounded too fancy. His father ordered a steak. Once the waiter departed, an awkward silence stretched between them. Jaden mustered the courage to ask, "Why didn't you visit more? You had all this money, right? You could have come?" He tried to keep the accusation out of his voice, but it was impossible not to sound hurt. His father winced, looking down at the polished table. "Your mother and I, we fought a lot. I felt unwelcome, and I was too proud to force my way into your life. I see now that was a mistake." He rapped his knuckles lightly on the table, frustration evident. "I can't change the past, but I can try now." Jaden listened, uncertain if he believed everything, but he appreciated the honesty. When their food arrived, they ate quietly, letting each other absorb the new reality. The burger tasted good to Jaden, though his nerves kept him from fully enjoying it. After dinner, his father drove him to a condominium in an upscale neighborhood. Jaden followed him inside, stepping into a polished foyer. He realized this might be where he would stay during his visit. The apartment boasted expensive art on the walls, plush furniture, and large windows that overlooked a skyline. Jaden set his bag down in the guest bedroom, feeling like a visitor in a mansion. That night, Jaden tossed and turned. He wondered if he was about to step into a new life, or if his time here was temporary. Just another short chapter. The next morning he awoke to sunlight streaming through the windows. His father was waiting in the kitchen, wearing a casual polo shirt. It struck Jaden that despite the man's imposing power at work, at home he seemed almost ordinary. He offered Jaden some breakfast, flipping pancakes on a griddle. Jaden accepted with a quiet, "Thank you." They ate, discussing the day's plan. His father promised to show him around the airline's headquarters and the hangars. Jaden wanted to be enthusiastic, but the memory of that flight still cast a shadow. He told himself to give his father a chance, to remain open to the idea that maybe he would finally have a bond with the man. They drove to a vast airport complex, bypassing the main terminals and heading toward a private hangar with the airline's logo emblazoned on the side. Security personnel waved them through. Inside, Jaden saw rows of planes, some undergoing maintenance, others ready to fly. Technicians and ground staff moved about, each occupied with tasks. His father led him around, explaining how each aircraft was inspected, how flight plans were coordinated. Jaden found himself fascinated by the scale of it all, the teamwork required to keep planes safely in the sky. They climbed the steps into a plane being prepped for a flight later that day. Jaden's father gestured toward the cockpit, explaining how the pilot's controls worked, how navigational instruments guided them across the globe. Jaden had never been inside an idle plane before. It gave him a new perspective, one that sparked a flutter of excitement. They continued into the first-class cabin. Jaden recognized the plush seats and the overhead compartments that had been so off-limits to him during his flight. He fought a sudden wave of bitterness. His father seemed to sense it, turning to face him. "What happened to you shouldn't happen to anyone. I need you to know that I'm doing everything I can to change the culture around here." Jaden nodded, folding his arms. "I appreciate that." A muffled voice called out from the end of the aisle. A member of the maintenance crew asked Jaden's father for assistance, so he excused himself, leaving Jaden to wander momentarily alone. Jaden moved between the rows, letting his fingers graze the seats. He recalled the embarrassment of being forced to leave a seat he had every right to occupy. It was as though the past was replaying in his mind, except now, he had the knowledge that his father owned this entire airline. He heard footsteps behind him. A woman he recognized as one of the executives from the previous day approached. She introduced herself as Ms. Henderson. She apologized again for the ordeal on Jaden's flight and assured him that the crew was being disciplined. He thanked her, politely but without much enthusiasm. She hesitated, then smiled thinly and moved on. Jaden wondered if she felt genuine remorse or if this was merely damage control. His father returned, explaining that one of the planes had a minor mechanical glitch that needed urgent attention. Jaden watched as his father shifted into work mode, calmly issuing directives to the staff to ensure everything was up to safety standards. He saw the way people listened closely to every word the man spoke. This was a side of fatherhood Jaden had never known. Later they headed back to the office building. His father had scheduled a series of meetings, so Jaden found himself pacing the corridors, trying not to get in the way. Eventually, he took a seat in a lounge area, scrolling aimlessly on his phone. He received a text from his mother, asking if he had landed safely and how things were going. He typed a short reply, leaving out the troubling details. An older employee named Mr. Patel stopped by, offering Jaden a soda from a nearby vending machine. Jaden accepted. Mr. Patel mentioned he had worked with Jaden's father from the early days of the airline. He recounted some stories of how Jaden's father started as just a pilot with big dreams, scrounging for investors. Jaden found it interesting, though a question gnawed at him. If his father had been so determined, why didn't he fight just as hard to be in Jaden's life? Eventually, his father emerged from a meeting and suggested they head out for lunch. They went to a more modest eatery this time. While they waited for food, Jaden discovered that his father had arranged for them to meet some individuals who had faced discrimination on flights. His father wanted Jaden to understand how the airline was addressing such issues. Jaden felt a jolt of unease. He appreciated the transparency, but wasn't sure he was ready to become a poster child for the cause. When they arrived at the designated office, they found a small gathering of men and women who had filed complaints against the airline in the past. They looked surprised to see the owner himself there, accompanied by a teenage boy. Jaden felt eyes upon him, uncertain why his father wanted him present. But as the conversation began, Jaden listened to heart-wrenching stories of biased treatment, from being overlooked for upgrades to being interrogated by staff for no apparent reason. One woman described being detained at a gate because a staff member doubted her ticket's legitimacy. Another man recounted an incident where a flight attendant demanded he stow all his belongings differently than other passengers, for no valid reason. Jaden's father offered apologies on behalf of the airline, promising changes in policy and more rigorous training. Jaden watched these individuals regard his father with a guarded hope. He wondered if any of them fully believed him. A few asked tough questions. Why had it taken so long? How could they be sure things would actually change? His father handled the inquiries with measured honesty, acknowledging that there was much work to do. As Jaden observed, he recognized sincerity in his father's tone. It struck him that his father might be genuinely committed to something bigger than just running a profitable business. After the meeting, Jaden lingered near the elevator while his father spoke privately with one of the guests. Jaden overheard bits and pieces about a new initiative that would require staff to undergo implicit bias training. The guest sounded cautiously optimistic, though he warned that it would take consistent effort to change attitudes within the airline. Jaden's father agreed, sounding humbled. They drove home in contemplative silence. Jaden stared out the window, absorbing the weight of what he had witnessed. That night, he retreated to his guest room, mind buzzing. The next morning, he heard his father on a phone call in the living room. It sounded tense, something about an investor threatening to pull out if the company drew too much negative attention. Jaden realized that while his father might be a powerful figure, there were still pressures from the business world. Nothing was simple. Over the following days, Jaden shadowed his father around the airline headquarters and occasionally at the maintenance hangars. He observed conversations about flight routes, expansions, cost analyses. More than once, he saw staff members casting curious looks in his direction. News traveled fast that the CEO's son had been mistreated on a flight. People whispered. Jaden felt their stares, a mixture of pity and curiosity. One afternoon, while Jaden waited alone in his father's office, a young female employee entered to drop off a file. She noticed Jaden, smiled, and introduced herself as Tamara. She offered him a piece of candy from her desk stash, explaining that working at the airline could be stressful. Jaden laughed softly, accepting the candy. They chatted briefly, and he told her about the city he'd come from, how his mother raised him by herself, and how strange it felt to be here now. Tamara listened sympathetically. She admitted she had also felt out of place when she first joined the airline, especially as a woman of color. Jaden found comfort in her honesty. His father returned, and Tamara excused herself. Later, Jaden mentioned to his father how people like Tamara seemed genuinely committed to making the airline better. His father nodded thoughtfully, then invited Jaden to accompany him to a dinner with a few key board members. Jaden felt hesitant. These were the people who actually controlled the airline's future. But he accepted, wanting to learn more about the father he was just beginning to know. That evening, they arrived at a high-rise downtown, greeted by a doorman who led them to a private event space. The board members were already gathered, sipping drinks and exchanging polite conversation. Jaden's father introduced him as my son, who recently had an unfortunate experience on one of our flights. The board members offered courteous smiles, and a few avoided direct eye contact. Jaden didn't miss that gesture. They sat at a long table, a formal dinner laid out. The conversation meandered from airline mergers to global economic trends. Jaden tuned out until one board member, a stiff older man with silver hair, turned to him and asked how he was enjoying first-class life. The comment dripped with sarcasm. Jaden shifted uncomfortably. His father's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure, simply stating that Jaden was here to observe and learn, not to be ridiculed. Another board member jumped in to diffuse the tension, but the silver-haired man doubled down, suggesting that making a fuss over one passenger's experience could damage their public image. Jaden's father remained calm, responding firmly that this was a matter of principle, not image. He explained that discrimination could not be tolerated, that policies needed strengthening, and that the airline's reputation would improve through genuine reform, not by sweeping issues under the rug. Jaden felt a surge of pride, hearing his father speak so forcefully. Despite the tension, the conversation moved forward, and by the end of the evening, the silver-haired board member had quieted, though he still cast an occasional glare in Jaden's direction. Jaden realized that not everyone shared his father's view. This caused him to wonder how many people in the airline truly wanted change, and how many were only interested in appearances. As the days passed, Jaden found himself in a conflicted emotional state. He admired how his father confronted injustice, yet he also harbored lingering resentment that the man hadn't been around during his childhood. He watched how employees respected, or in some cases, feared, his father. He saw that the corporate world was ruthless, with cunning politics at play. Yet amidst it all, his father stood resolute in pushing for fairness. One afternoon, while they were on their way to yet another meeting, Jaden noticed his father rubbing his temples, looking stressed. Jaden asked if everything was okay. His father admitted that some major investors had threatened to remove their funding if the airline's push for cultural change became too controversial. That revelation stunned Jaden. He was just beginning to glimpse how complex running a business could be. He asked his father if he regretted any of it. His father's response was immediate. Never. That night, they returned to the condominium, where Jaden found himself rummaging in the fridge for a late snack. His father joined him, and they ended up talking at the kitchen counter, sipping cold sodas in the hush of the apartment. Jaden admitted that he didn't know how to reconcile the powerful father he now saw with the absent father from his childhood. His father, eyes downcast, said he understood the confusion and wished he could turn back time. He promised Jaden that going forward, he would be there. Jaden, not fully convinced, nodded. A cautious part of him wanted to believe. Their conversation shifted to Jaden's aspirations. His father inquired if Jaden ever thought about a career in aviation. Jaden was non-committal, explaining that he liked technology, coding, and gaming. His father listened carefully, suggesting that the airline had a technology division that dealt with everything from booking systems to flight simulations. Jaden perked up, intrigued by the possibility of exploring that side of the business. They made arrangements for Jaden to visit the tech department the following day. There, Jaden met programmers, data analysts, and network engineers who ensured the airline's digital infrastructure ran smoothly. He watched them troubleshoot flight scheduling software, marveled at lines of code flashing across large monitors. One developer offered Jaden a quick tutorial on how they simulated a flight path using complex algorithms. Jaden found the demonstration thrilling, a world away from the humiliations in first class. He realized that an airline wasn't just about planes and airports, it was a massive coordination of technology and human expertise. As the week wore on, Jaden's father encouraged him to explore more facets of the airline. Jaden took short tours of the customer service department and marketing teams. He was impressed by how each department fit into a bigger puzzle. Yet, inevitably, the conversation would circle back to the discrimination he had faced. He overheard managers discussing revised protocols, flight attendants undergoing new training modules, and legal teams drafting guidelines to ensure fair treatment. Jaden remained quietly astonished that his one encounter could trigger so much change. One evening, they visited a local community center where the airline had sponsored an educational program for underprivileged youth interested in aviation careers. Jaden's father was a guest speaker. The kids, mostly from minority backgrounds, listened in rapt attention as he spoke about his journey from pilot to CEO. Then, unexpectedly, he asked Jaden to step forward and share his perspective. Nervously, Jaden explained his recent flight experience, how it had shaken him, and how it brought to light the issues of bias in the airline industry. He encouraged the kids not to be discouraged if they encountered obstacles. Jaden realized his hands were trembling by the time he finished talking. After the speech, a few of the kids approached him with questions about coding, asking if there were ways they could combine that skill with aviation. Jaden felt a rush of excitement, describing some of the things he had learned in the tech department. He saw in their eyes the same spark that he felt, the notion that they could belong in a space that often seemed out of reach. Back at the condominium, Jaden confessed to his father that he hadn't expected to speak at the community center. His father smiled, calling it a valuable opportunity to share a real personal story. Jaden admitted that he had appreciated it, despite the nerves. Another day passed, and Jaden decided to call his mother. He told her about what had happened in detail, from being forced out of first class to discovering that his father owned the entire airline. His mother was stunned, demanding to speak to his father. A tense conversation followed, one that Jaden only heard from his father's end. He detected anger and frustration in both voices. By the time the call ended, Jaden's father exhaled deeply, saying that it would take time for Jaden's mother to trust him again. The following morning, Jaden's father received a message that the flight attendant who had removed Jaden from first class was requesting a meeting. The woman, whose name was recorded as Mrs. Turner, wanted to apologize in person. Jaden felt a wave of mixed emotions. He wasn't sure if he wanted to see her, but his father said it might offer closure. Reluctantly, Jaden agreed. They arranged for Mrs. Turner to come to his father's office. She arrived, looking pale and anxious, accompanied by a union representative. Jaden sat in a chair beside his father, who remained silent for a moment before inviting Mrs. Turner to explain herself. She stammered that she had acted on a misunderstanding, that she believed Jaden's seat was double booked. She insisted that it had nothing to do with his race. Jaden felt his stomach tighten with disbelief. His father leaned forward, voice controlled but intense. He pointed out the airline's logs that showed Jaden was the only person assigned that seat. The union representative shifted uncomfortably, stating that perhaps the gate agent had communicated incorrectly. Mrs. Turner glanced at Jaden, tears in her eyes, insisting that she never intended to humiliate him. Jaden listened quietly, observing that no matter how much she claimed it was a misunderstanding, she had treated him differently than everyone else in first class. Jaden's father remained outwardly composed, though his anger was palpable. He told Mrs. Turner that the airline did not tolerate such incidents. She would be placed on probation, required to undergo training, and, if no improvement was shown, she would be terminated. The union representative nodded glumly, accepting the terms. Jaden's father then looked at Jaden, inviting him to speak if he wanted. Jaden took a deep breath. He said he accepted the apology if it was genuine. He explained the hurt and embarrassment he felt, not just because of the inconvenience, but because of what it represented. He told her that he hoped she would never treat another passenger the way she treated him. She nodded, seemingly contrite. After they left, Jaden felt a swirl of emotions, relieved to have closure, yet unsettled by how easily it could happen again to someone else. His father placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder, asking if he was all right. Jaden nodded, feeling a small measure of weight lift from his chest. That evening, Jaden's father took him to a local jazz club, saying he needed a break from corporate chaos. Jaden found the atmosphere soothing, the low murmur of voices, the saxophone's melody weaving through the air. They sat in a dim corner, sipping soft drinks, letting the music wash over them. Jaden's father reminisced about the early days when he was a pilot and spent layovers in such clubs, soaking in the city's vibrant culture. Jaden found himself captivated by the stories, wishing he could have been there. In a quiet moment, Jaden asked if the airline was truly safe now. His father hesitated, swirling the ice in his glass. He admitted that despite efforts to improve, no airline or company was perfect. Bias could surface anywhere. The key, he said, was to maintain vigilance, accountability, and a willingness to evolve. Jaden respected that honesty, even if it scared him a little. A few days later, Jaden was scheduled to fly back home. He packed his things in the guest bedroom, a bittersweet feeling tugging at him. He had grown used to this fleeting routine, waking up to have breakfast with his father, accompanying him to the airline offices, seeing a side of the world he had never before imagined. Now, it was time to go. He wasn't sure when he would be back. He also felt unresolved about the deeper questions of their relationship. But he had to return to his mother, to his life. His father assured him they would stay in touch, that future visits would be planned. Jaden dared to hope this wasn't just empty talk. They arrived at the airport, heading to a private check-in area. His father had arranged for Jaden to fly first class again, determined that the experience should be positive this time. Jaden tried not to show his unease. As they approached the gate, the staff recognized his father instantly, greeting him with deference. Jaden stepped forward, handing over his boarding pass. This time, there was no hesitation. The gate agent smiled warmly, welcoming Jaden to first class. He felt a silent triumph, though a part of him wondered if the staff only acted this way because his father stood right there. His father walked him down the jet bridge, stopping just before the plane's entrance. They stood face to face. His father told him he was proud of him for handling the adversity with maturity. He apologized once more for not being there in the past, promising to make up for lost time. Jaden gulped, feeling tears threaten. He managed a nod, uncertain if words would betray the emotion he felt. They embraced briefly, a father and son still learning how to hold each other. Then Jaden boarded. The flight attendant, a different person than before, greeted him with genuine kindness, guiding him to his seat. He settled in, slightly on edge, but determined to let go of the memory that had haunted him. The plane filled, and as it taxied onto the runway, Jaden looked out the window, imagining his father standing at the terminal, watching the aircraft rise into the sky. During the flight, Jaden observed the other passengers in first class. This time, he was offered a drink before takeoff, served a proper meal, and addressed politely. The difference was stark. He let himself enjoy it. He thought about how everything had changed in just a short time. He had come on this flight as a stranger to first class, humiliated by prejudice. Now he was returning with a deeper understanding of who he was, who his father was, and how the world worked. When he finally stepped off the plane at his home airport, his mother stood waiting in baggage claim, worry etched on her face. Her expression shifted to relief when she saw him. They hugged. She asked how everything went. Jaden admitted it was complicated but insisted he was okay. Over the next few days, he told her more, explaining how his father owned the airline, how he had intervened, how disciplinary actions had been taken, and how Jaden had seen a glimpse of a better future. His mother listened quietly, sometimes nodding, other times expressing skepticism about his father's sudden involvement. Back at home, Jaden resumed his normal life. School, friends, chores. He had moments where the entire journey felt like a dream. Now and then he received texts or calls from his father, checking in, asking about his day. They even scheduled a video chat so Jaden could show him a science project he'd been working on. Though a part of Jaden remained guarded, another part dared to feel hope blooming. Weeks passed, and Jaden's father made another trip to see him. They spent a weekend together, which included a visit to a local aviation museum. Jaden saw the sparkle in his father's eyes as they looked at old aircraft, each one representing a chapter of aeronautical history. His father explained the mechanical marvels, while Jaden asked questions about the technology behind them. Afterward, they sat in a small cafe near the museum, discussing how an airplane's wings generate lift, and how that principle might relate metaphorically to the problems Jaden had faced. Sometimes, to lift off, you need the right angle, his father mused, tapping the table thoughtfully. After that weekend, Jaden returned to school with a renewed sense of identity. He told a few friends about his father's airline, though most of them didn't believe him at first. One classmate teased him, claiming he was making it all up. Jaden shrugged it off, feeling more confident than before. He had witnessed enough to know his story was real, no matter who believed it. He stayed in touch with the friend he had met on the plane, Andre, who was intrigued by Jaden's father's ownership of the airline. They chatted occasionally about sports, gaming, and how bizarre life could be. Jaden realized that friendship could blossom from even the strangest circumstances. Over the coming months, Jaden's father continued to update him on new policies being implemented in the airline. There were expansions in diversity hiring, better training for flight attendants, and a newly formed committee dedicated to addressing passenger complaints related to bias. Jaden felt a sense of pride that he had inadvertently spurred some of these changes. Meanwhile, newspapers picked up the story, though Jaden's identity was kept private in most reports. Some articles praised the airline's commitment to improving, while others remained skeptical. One day, Jaden was invited to speak at a small conference about youth perspectives on travel and diversity. Nervous but determined, he agreed. Standing at a podium in a modest auditorium, he recounted his experiences in first class. He spoke candidly about the sting of racism and the moment he learned his father was the airline's owner. The audience listened attentively, applauding when he finished. Among the crowd, Jaden spotted his father, face beaming with pride. Later that evening, his father pulled him aside, telling him how courageous he was to share his story publicly. Jaden shrugged, admitting he was terrified, but found it liberating to speak out. His father gave him a rare grin, one that seemed to erase the awkward distances between them. In the following weeks, they strategized new ways to engage with communities. Jaden started volunteering at youth centers, helping kids learn about coding and technology in aviation. He used some of the knowledge he'd gained from his visits to the tech department. Slowly, he felt himself stepping into a future he had never anticipated, one where he might be a bridge between the airline world and others like him who once felt excluded. His mother watched this growth with cautious approval. She and Jaden's father still had much to resolve, but they managed polite conversations for Jaden's sake. Over time, the anger in her eyes softened, replaced by a guarded respect when she saw the changes Jaden's father was making. They even attended a mediation session together, trying to untangle the knots of the past. Sometimes, Jaden felt exhausted by the ups and downs. He was still a teenager, juggling homework, friendships, and typical adolescent worries. The added layer of grappling with his father's business and the attention it drew was immense, but he recognized that he was no longer the boy who boarded that plane in fear. He had found his voice in the process. One particularly memorable afternoon, Jaden joined his father at a regional airport where the airline was launching a pilot program to bring STEM education to underprivileged high schools. They brought in flight simulators, letting students experiment with the controls. Jaden walked around, showing groups of curious teens how to navigate a virtual runway. He noticed the awe in their eyes, the same awe he had felt in the actual cockpit. His father stood at a slight distance, proudly observing. After the event, they walked around the tarmac. Jaden's father asked if he wanted to try an introductory flight in a small two-seater plane, something a local flight school had offered. Jaden hesitated, excitement mixing with a touch of fear. Ultimately, he agreed. They took to the sky with an instructor, floating above the landscape. Jaden's father sat in the back seat, smiling as Jaden held the controls briefly under the instructor's guidance. The moment felt surreal, the horizon stretching endlessly before them, a metaphor for the possibilities that lay ahead. When they landed, Jaden's adrenaline coursed through him. His father clapped him on the shoulder, looking genuinely happy. For once, Jaden let himself bask in that paternal pride. He realized that the same man who had been absent for so many years was now giving him a memory he would cherish forever. Weeks turned to months, and as Jaden's school year approached its end, he received a special invitation from his father to join him for a summer internship at the airline. Jaden's mother had reservations, but after many discussions, she agreed, provided that Jaden's father would ensure his well-being. Jaden was thrilled by the chance to gain hands-on experience in the tech department and beyond. He felt a spark inside him, a drive to prove himself, not just to his father, but to his own sense of worth. During that summer, Jaden dove into projects, learning about flight reservation systems, data security, and passenger analytics. He discovered how algorithms determined everything from ticket prices to boarding priorities. He saw how crucial it was to program fairness into those systems, ensuring that the software itself wasn't biased. He collaborated with mentors who guided him patiently, impressed by his curiosity. Outside of work, he spent evenings with his father, sharing dinner, playing chess, or simply talking about the day. They still stumbled at times, not always sure how to navigate each other's emotions, but there was progress. Jaden saw the guilt in his father's eyes whenever he brought up old memories. He tried to let his father know that building a future together was more important than rehashing every mistake. Midway through the summer, an unexpected crisis hit the airline. A flight experienced mechanical trouble, forcing an emergency landing. No one was hurt, but the media seized upon it, raising questions about safety standards. The stock price dipped, and investors panicked again. Jaden witnessed the tension in his father's posture, the furious phone calls late into the night. Yet, in the midst of it all, his father prioritized addressing any potential safety lapses, refusing to cut corners. That integrity impressed Jaden. He realized the depth of responsibility his father carried. Simultaneously, the airline faced a lawsuit from a passenger claiming discriminatory treatment, separate from Jaden's incident. This reignited debates on whether the company's reforms were too slow. Jaden's father tackled the issue head-on, inviting the passenger to speak directly with him and the newly formed bias committee. Some cynics in the company rolled their eyes at what they saw as an overcorrection, but Jaden silently applauded his father's dedication. He remembered the pain of being singled out and refused to discount anyone else's experience. Toward the end of the summer, Jaden's internship concluded with a small celebration in the tech department. His fellow interns teased him about his secret identity as the CEO's son, but also praised his willingness to work hard and learn. Jaden gave a short speech, thanking them for teaching him so much, especially about the importance of empathy in technology. As he spoke, He caught his father leaning in the doorway, pride evident on his face. A week later, Jaden prepared to return home, ready for the new school year. He felt conflicted. On one hand, he missed his old life with his mother and friends. On the other hand, he had grown comfortable in this new environment, forging a shaky but blossoming bond with his father. His father drove him to the airport once again, though this time the mood was lighter. They joked about the day Jaden had first arrived, how everything was so tense and uncertain. At the check-in desk, employees smiled warmly, some even greeting Jaden by name. He wondered if that was because they truly respected him or because they knew who he was. Regardless, he boarded the plane with an easy heart. He noticed that his seat assignment was in first class, yet again. This time, it felt right, not forced. As he took his seat, he glanced around, recalling every detail that had brought him here. The flight was smooth, the service polite, the meal served graciously. Jaden gazed out the window, contemplating how much his life had changed. He remembered the initial humiliation of being kicked out of first class, how powerless he had felt. Now, he had discovered not only a father, but a path to rewriting the airline story, one policy at a time. He also carried with him a deeper understanding that injustice was everywhere, but so were opportunities to push back against it. When Jaden landed and emerged into the arrivals hall, his mother stood there, arms folded, an expectant look on her face. He rushed forward, hugging her. She asked about his summer. He told her that it was the most eye-opening experience of his life. They headed home, and he shared countless stories, from the flight simulators to the crisis management, from meeting kids at the youth center to hearing the admissions of Mrs. Turner. His mother listened carefully, her eyes occasionally misting with tears. She admitted she was proud of how he handled himself, seeing he was growing into a person with empathy and strength. Though the school year brought its typical workload, Jaden's relationship with his father continued in phone calls and video chats. They made plans for holiday visits, possibly traveling together. Jaden realized he might become part of the airline's future if he wished. Doors had opened to him that he never knew existed. He felt both excitement and responsibility weighing on him. Life had changed irreversibly from that day he stood nervously at the gate, boarding pass clutched in hand, uncertain of where he belonged. The sting of being denied a seat had morphed into a catalyst for transformation, within himself, within his father, and within the entire airline. And as he navigated the complexities of being a teenager, a son, and possibly an heir to an aviation empire, he held on to one steadfast belief. No matter how high one flies, one must never forget the humanity in every seat, from first class to the back row of the cabin. Did you enjoy this story of ambition, courage, and the power of one voice to spark change? Let us know in the comments. What part resonated with you the most, or which character's journey surprised you? We love hearing your thoughts. And if you want more stories like this, full of twists, heart, and inspiration, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's plenty more where this came from, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey.
David sat in the comfort of his sleek black SUV, the kind of car that symbolized his success and status. But success, he was realizing, didn't stop the clock or the tide of bad luck. The sun was blistering that day, hanging high and merciless in the clear blue sky, and his meeting was already in jeopardy. He drummed his fingers impatiently against the wheel, stealing a glance at his expensive watch. The narrow road stretched endlessly before him, flanked by fields of swaying grass, dry and golden under the summer heat. He shifted his focus back to the road, muttering under his breath, when it happened. A sudden, sharp jolt shook the car, and the smooth hum of the engine was replaced by an unmistakable, rhythmic thumping. His stomach sank as he pulled the SUV over to the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires. The moment he stepped out, the heat slammed into him like a wave. Adjusting his tie and loosening his collar, he crouched beside the front tire and confirmed his suspicion. A flat. Not just a flat, but a shredded mess of rubber, rendered useless. He swore under his breath, pulling his phone from his pocket. No bars, no signal. The shiny high-tech gadget was as good as a paperweight. He leaned back against the car, the frustration brewing in his chest. David wasn't the type of man who handled inconveniences gracefully. His life was built on efficiency and delegation. He made decisions, signed checks, and people executed them. Fixing a flat tire wasn't his domain. It was someone else's job. The road was silent except for the occasional rustling of the breeze. He glanced around, half hoping to see another car. None came. Instead, a figure appeared in the distance, walking steadily toward him. A boy, no more than 14, wearing a faded t-shirt and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. David squinted against the glare of the sun as the boy drew closer. "Hey, mister," the boy called out, his voice carrying a friendly tone. "Need some help?" David froze for a moment, caught off guard by the boy's sudden appearance and directness. The boy didn't hesitate, though. He stopped a few feet away from the SUV, glancing at the flat tire, then back at David. "Yeah, flat tire," David finally replied, his tone clipped but polite. "No signal out here." He gestured vaguely to the stretch of barren road, silently cursing his luck again. The boy crouched beside the tire, examining it with a focused expression. "You got a spare?" he asked, looking up at David. His tone was casual, like fixing tires on sweltering summer days was just another Tuesday for him. Yeah, in the back," David said, uncertain. He wasn't sure why, but there was something about this kid, calm, unbothered by the situation, that left him slightly unsettled. "Mind if I take a look?" the boy asked, standing up and brushing dirt from his knees. His demeanor was confident, almost commanding in its simplicity. David nodded and stepped aside, watching as the boy moved to the back of the SUV. He opened the hatch, rummaging briefly before pulling out the spare tire and tools. "This'll do," the boy said with a small grin. He set the tools down beside the flat and got to work. David stood awkwardly to the side, unsure of what to say or do. He wasn't used to this, to relying on someone else, especially a kid, for something so manual. "You've done this before?" David asked after a moment, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Yeah," the boy replied, without looking up. "My dad taught me. Says you never know when someone might need help." David watched as the boy worked quickly and efficiently, loosening lug nuts and replacing the shredded tire with practiced ease. His small hands moved with precision, and the rhythmic clank of the wrench was oddly reassuring. Sweat beaded on his brow, but he didn't complain or slow down. David found himself strangely impressed, and a little humbled. "Why are you helping me?" David asked, breaking the silence. The boy looked up briefly, a small smile on his face. "Why not?" When the job was done, the boy stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All set," he said, a touch of pride in his voice. David blinked, still processing what had just happened. "That was fast," David said, his voice trailing off. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a few bills. "Here, for your trouble." But the boy immediately shook his head, backing away slightly. "Nah, mister. I don't need that." David frowned, holding out the money. "No, really. You earned it. I insist." The boy just smiled, the kind of genuine smile that people rarely gave anymore. "I just wanted to help. That's all." Before David could protest further, the boy turned and started walking away, his steps casual and unhurried. He waved over his shoulder. "Take care, mister." David stood there, the bills still in his hand, watching as the boy disappeared down the road. He felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. He climbed back into the SUV, slipping the money back into his wallet. As he started the engine and pulled back onto the road, he glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The boy's silhouette grew smaller and smaller until it vanished completely. For the rest of the drive, David couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. It wasn't just that the boy had helped him. It was how he had done it. Without hesitation, without expectation, just because. That kind of kindness was foreign to David, a man who had spent most of his life in boardrooms and business deals, where every action came with a cost or an ulterior motive. He didn't know what to make of it. By the time he reached home, the boy's smile was still etched in his mind. The next morning, David woke up with an unfamiliar sense of purpose. He couldn't shake the memory of the boy. Lucas, he'd said his name was. Something about the encounter had left a mark on him, and he felt compelled to do something in return. By mid-morning, David was back on that rural road, scanning the horizon for the small figure that had appeared so unexpectedly the day before. He didn't find Lucas, but he did find a small, weathered house set back from the road. It looked tired and worn, the paint peeling and the porch sagging slightly under its own weight. David parked his SUV and walked up the path, hesitating briefly before knocking on the door. It creaked open a moment later, and a woman appeared. She was in her mid-30s, her face lined with the kind of weariness that came from working hard and carrying more than her share of burdens. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. "I'm looking for Lucas," David said, suddenly feeling a little awkward. "He helped me with my car yesterday." The woman's expression softened. She stepped back and called over her shoulder, "Lucas, someone's here for you." Lucas appeared moments later, his face lighting up when he saw David. "Oh, hey, mister. You good? The tire holding up?" David smiled, the boy's enthusiasm catching him off guard. "Yeah, it's fine. I wanted to thank you properly." Lucas tilted his head slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "Thank me? But I already said it's no big deal, mister." David crouched slightly, trying to meet Lucas at eye level. "It is a big deal to me. What you did, most people wouldn't. You didn't just fix my tire. You reminded me." He trailed off, unsure of how to articulate what he was feeling. He stood up and gestured toward the house. "Is this your home?" Lucas nodded. "Yeah, me and my mom." David glanced at the house again, taking in its peeling paint, sagging roof, and the way the porch seemed to lean under its own weight. It wasn't just old. It looked like it was holding on by a thread. He turned back to Lucas and his mother, who stood watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "I want to do something for you," David said finally. "Not because I owe you, but because I want to. Let me help fix this place up." The woman, Lucas's mother, tensed slightly. "Oh no, mister, we couldn't possibly—" "Please," David interrupted gently. "You didn't ask me for anything. And that's what makes me want to help even more. I have the resources. I can call a crew and have this place looking good as new. It's the least I can do." Lucas glanced at his mom, his face lighting up with a glamour of hope, though he didn't say anything. His mother hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she sighed. "We're not used to handouts," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. David smiled. "This isn't a handout. It's a thank you. And I promise, I'll keep things simple. Just the essentials. No strings attached." After a long pause, she nodded. "All right, but nothing fancy, okay?" David extended a hand, and she shook it reluctantly, but with a faint smile. Deal. David didn't waste any time. By the next morning, a small team of workers had arrived, and the house was buzzing with activity. The roof was the first thing on the list, patched and reinforced within days. The peeling paint was stripped away, replaced with a fresh, vibrant coat that instantly brought new life to the home. Inside, the floors were repaired, the plumbing fixed, and the drafty windows were replaced with sturdy, weather-tight panes. Throughout it all, Lucas was a constant presence, eagerly offering to help wherever he could. He carried tools, swept up sawdust, and even held boards in place, while the workers hammered them into the frame. His energy was infectious, and David found himself more involved than he had anticipated. He wasn't just overseeing the project. He was part of it. For the first time in years, David felt a sense of connection, of purpose. Lucas's mother, Clara, watched the renovations with cautious optimism. "I can't believe how much you've done already," she said one afternoon as she and David stood on the newly rebuilt porch, watching the workers finish up for the day. David leaned against the railing, smiling. "It's not just me. Lucas has been a great project manager." Clara chuckled softly, shaking her head. "He's always been like that, always wanting to help." David glanced at Lucas, who was handing a tool to one of the workers, his face glowing with pride. "He's a remarkable kid. You've done an amazing job raising him." Clara's smile faltered slightly, and she looked away. "We've had some hard years. But Lucas, he's my reason to keep going." David nodded, his voice soft. "I get that, and I think he's going to do incredible things someday." The last day of renovations came faster than anyone expected. The house, once worn and tired, now stood tall and sturdy, radiating warmth and life. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home, transformed by kindness and care. David arrived early that morning, his black SUV pulling into the familiar driveway. Lucas was already on the porch, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mister, it's done," he called, waving him over. David stepped out, taking a moment to admire the house. The fresh paint gleamed in the morning sun, the repaired porch no longer sagged, and the yard had been tidied up, giving the entire property a renewed sense of pride. "It looks incredible," David said, walking up to Lucas. "What do you think?" Lucas grinned. "I think it's perfect." Clara joined them on the porch, her hands clasped tightly together. "Mr. David, I don't even know where to begin. You've done more for us than I ever thought possible." David reached into his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. "Actually, there's one more thing." Clara's brow furrowed as she took the envelope, opening it carefully. Her eyes widened as she scanned the papers inside. "Is this—" Her voice cracked with emotion. "It's a trust fund," David explained. "For Lucas, so he can go to college or pursue whatever dreams he has." Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and tears filled her eyes. "Mr. David, this is too much." Lucas stared up at David, his own eyes wide with disbelief. "For me?" David crouched down, placing a hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, Lucas, and I want to make sure you have every chance to chase it." Lucas threw his arms around David in an impulsive hug, his voice muffled against David's chest. "Thank you, mister. Thank you so much." David hugged him back, his heart full. "You're welcome, kid. You've already changed my life. Now it's your turn to change the world." The neighborhood gathered that evening to celebrate the transformation. The house wasn't just a symbol of renewal. It was a reminder of what could happen when people came together to lift each other up. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the yard in a golden glow, David stood beside Clara and Lucas, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Thank you, Clara said quietly, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. For everything. David looked at her, then at Lucas, who was laughing with a group of neighbors. No, he said softly. Thank you. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, David knew this was just the beginning of a new journey, one defined not by success or wealth, but by connection, purpose, and the simple, profound power of kindness. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. And remember, kindness doesn't just change lives, it changes the world.